This is John Muir. He was a conservationist during the conservation movement in the late 1800s. He was also a leading founder of the Sierra Club and aimed to preserve natural areas from human interference. Muir discovered the Yosemite Valley in the late 1860s. After discovering the Yosemite Valley, Muir spent 3 years living there, and then this led for him to push for the preservation of the land.
I will protect all nature life. This land is Yosemite. It shall be preserved.
You know, Thomas Muir was truly inspirational, and he played a pivotal role in preserving the wildlife and natural land in our country. You know, and I mean, I just don't know how much wildlife would be alive in this country today if it weren't for him.
My one goal is to preserve the nature in this country because the westward expansion has really taken a toll on the wildlife and the nature that's so beautiful in this land. It must be preserved.
Another important thing that happened during this time period was the expansion westward and the kicking of Native Americans out of their land for a second time.
Hello, welcome to our territory filled with peace and love.
Hello.
Hi. Hold on.
You guys want to go over there real quick?
No, it's not that.
Let's go over there real quick.
We're taking it over. You can go over there.
Yeah.
It's ours now. Native Americans, again, for the second time in the history of the United States, were kicked off their land simply because white people thought that they were more superior or had more power than them and wanted their land more. With this being the second time that this happened, the Native Americans were not very happy, and many wars and deaths were brought out of it. Also, a person that tried to help the Native Americans was Helen Hunt by her publication of A Century of Dishonor. The main purpose of it was to stop the mistreatment of Native Americans and kind of let them go on their own, but instead it kind of encouraged schools or academies that would reform the Native beliefs into like American beliefs a little bit.
William Jennings Bryan was supported by many populists due to his Cross of Gold speech which he gave in Chicago. William Jennings Bryan also supported the abolition of gold and wanted everybody to support silver.
Bryan, I am supportive of the Populist Party, and I think that the workers of this country should get more profit. I also think that our currency should be switched back to silver instead of gold.
The running of William Jennings Bryan was bad news for the monopolist as he vowed to take down the wealthy class.
Man, this Jennings Bryan guy is bad news. We need someone right now who can run for us and keep us up, like, with our money.
We need McKinley.
Well, I can sure pay for him. I am William McKinley, and I believe in supporting big businesses. I believe in the idea of social Darwinism and survival of the fittest. The people who work the hardest should be earning the most amount of money.
Listen here. A vote for William Jennings Bryan is a vote for robbery. He wants to take our money. He wants to take our jobs. We can't let him do this.
No!
We need our money. We worked hard. We worked hard for our money, and we're going to keep it. William Jennings Bryan is a thief. He's a thief.
Hello, sir. Who would you like to vote for today?
Bryan.
No.
Okay. Oh. Still vote for
No, you're going to have to vote for McKinley.
Why? Why would I do that?
Because I said so. So put that in the McKinley jar, right? Thank you, sir.
What was that even about?
William McKinley is now in power because of his relations with big monopolies and his political ties with them, and they paid for his campaign, which spread lies about William James Bryant.
McKinley is now in power thanks to the help of big business, and the monopolies are now safe. Unfortunately, McKinley's presidency is cut short.
See ya. The death of McKinley affected big businessmen in many different ways. There was no one to protect their money or their businesses, and Theodore Roosevelt was going to take the presidency, and no one knew if their money was safe. The assassination of McKinley marked another time that a president failed in this era. The presidents had little to no impact on the country during this time period. Businessmen and monopolies ran the country and had more power than the government, even though they controlled the government. Now we will get into the intellectual and cultural movements during the Gilded Age.
The Gilded Age was the name for the time period, and it was coined by Mark Twain. It was meant to show something that was shining and glimmering on the outside, but not so on the inside.
The temperance movement was started to reduce the amount of alcohol-related abuse towards wives by drunken husbands.
Another big movement during the time period was for equal rights between women and men.
Equal rights, equal rights, equal rights, equal rights, equal rights.
I think it's just unbelievable that women do not have the equal rights as men. They get paid less. They don't get the same jobs. I'm just lost for words on. Oh, they're the same. They're just awesome beings that can do great work, and they're just.
The Seneca Falls Convention was one of the biggest women's rights movements ever. And the Declaration of Rights and Sentiments really just highlighted the amazing work of these women and how they were so invested to become independent and get these equal rights as men that they deserved.
The women, they work just as hard and just as long days as men, yet they don't get paid nearly as much. It's just disappointing.
While the rich people were living lavish lifestyles at this time, the poor were condemned to dirty cities and hard-working jobs with very little pay. The working conditions of this time were very bad. People had to work long hours, sometimes up to 12 or even 13 or more, and they were left with very little pay, and they were forced to do very hard tasks and work with their bodies all day. And
Dude, I hate this job so much.
It's so boring. There's nothing to do here.
My whole body hurts. I've been here for 13 hours, no breaks.
I think you should just take one.
Dude, we need to. You know what? Fuck. This boss, man.
What did you say?
these poor conditions would sometimes cause labor strikes.
That's it. I'm tired of you. Let's get out.
Get this scum. Strike! 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 Strike!
Strike! Strike! Strike! Strike! Strike! Strike! Strike! Strike! Strike! Strike! Strike!
Hi, I'm Nick Smith. Here, I am the starting shooting guard for the official Stay Clear basketball team. I'm here to talk to you about the harsh living and working conditions that these poor workers in the 18th to 19th century had to live. They had 15 to 20 people in only a small 100 square foot room. The big bosses, such as Vanderbilt, and they would just take down and push around those poor people. Oh, woo! I've been at work for so long. Thankfully, I get to come home to this beautiful house.
It is so hot in here. Why do we have to live right next to the furnace?
I just pooped out the window.
I go back to work for 16 hours.
The Bessemer process, which was made mainstream by Andrew Carnegie, greatly affected the way buildings were made, as they were now made of steel and could be greatly taller. Great cities like Chicago and New York sprung up, and buildings were now everywhere, and tall apartment buildings were very common.
And on the other side of the spectrum, while the North was struggling in the factories, the South was struggling to rebuild after the Civil War. They needed to switch to industrialization because of the practice of slavery ending. But it was very tough because they had to compete with the North, making goods and resources.
Man, that Civil War really took a toll on my farm.
Man, it sucks. We have to pay people to do our work now.
I know. Now that's how we're talking about industrializing, and I don't even know what's gonna happen to my plantation now.
I don't want to work in the factory.
I know.
The Gilded Age really affected many people in different ways. Obviously, if you were owner of a big business or a monopoly, it was a great time for you. But if you were a poor factory worker, this time was not so good. And overall, although it looked good on the outside, for most of the hard-working Americans and immigrants and people coming into the country, it was just not a very good time, you know?
Thank you for watching this episode of
The Men Who Built America, the Gilded Age.
Apush Gang.
Tune back in next week as we discuss the hocus pocus behind global warming.
Hey.
Bloopers!
I am, dude.
Thank you for watching. This has been
Amazing. I am William Jennings Bryan.
No, you're not.
I am William Jennings Bryan. I am a supporter of the Populist Party, and I want silver for farmers, and I think we should stand up for people who work this country. I am William Jennings Bryan. I am a supporter of the Populist Party.
Whose drink is this?
Oh my God.
I am William Jennings Bryan.
I didn't even do anything. I'm William McKinley, and I'm here to support the big businesses. I believe in the ideas such as social Darwinism.
That's fine, keep going.
I'm gonna start.
Listen here. I'll vote for James Bryant. With the racism, many pro-activists in the abolishment of racism tried to get the president and other figures.
Nick. Come help me look for something.
I'm William McKinley, and I.